Since the Nats won in New York on both Saturday and Sunday to decrease the Mets' playoff chances, Walters will treat everyone to their first beer at the Nats Chat podcast party on Friday night, October 10th at 7 p.m. Walters is located just across the street from the ballpark.
And now here comes Michael A. Taylor to the plate.
Major league game after a 12-year career. Now batting, former Nationals outfielder Michael A. Taylor.
Riley Adams is standing out on the grass in front of home plate and applauding, as are all of the Nationals on the top step of the dugout. Listen to this crowd for Michael Taylor. Officially announced his retirement this morning, effective after this game.
2-2 count, runner at first. The pitch. Swing a long drive for Fletcher. Deep right field. Cruz chasing back. This one is going and gone. First homer in the big leagues this year for Fletcher. And Lord has been hit hard in this inning. It's 5-0 Chicago.
And now Cannon starts the wind and the pitch. Over the inside corner. Strike three called. And season number 21 of Washington Nationals baseball is in the books.
And welcome to Nats Chat, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who is at Nationals Park. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. It is over. It is done. The Nationals 2025 season is over, and it ended with an 8-0 loss to the American League worst Chicago White Sox at Nationals Park on Sunday. This for the Nats' 14th shutout loss in MLB's now concluded 2025 regular season. Yes, the Nats in their final game of the season got victimized at home via a one-hit shutout by the worst team in the American League. A fitting ending to the Nats' atrocious 2025 season. Although we did have some more good vibes at Nationals Park off the Bob Carpenter send-off on Saturday. We on Sunday had White Sox outfielder and, of course, former Nats outfielder Michael A. Taylor prior to the game announcing that he is retiring, and he got a really nice reception from Nationals Park fans, as you would expect. But the Nats lost 2 out of 3 games in the series. The Nats in MLB's 2025 regular season went 66-96 and had a run differential of -212. The Nats had the worst record in the National League East, the second worst record in the National League, and the third worst record in MLB. The Nats had the second worst run differential in the National League and in MLB. Now, this was only the 5th worst regular season for the Nats in terms of winning percentage since the franchise moved to Washington, D.C. in the 04-05 offseason. 2022, 2009, 2008, and 2021 all were worse, but for reasons that we have discussed many times, you could argue that this was the most disappointing season for the Nats since the franchise moved to D.C. But through it all, we have been here with you on this, the only podcast for which there is a new episode for the morning after every regular season Nats game day. You know, someday I'll say, and postseason Nats game day, but maybe next season. We're not there yet, though. But we appreciate you listening very much. This installment of Nats Chat is brought to us by the great Mason Kalfas, the top legal recruiter in Washington, D.C. Mason has been with us since our very first season of 2021. We appreciate that very much. And you can reach Mason at 202-486-3535. So, Mark, the season is over, but now the offseason begins, and we are anticipating an introductory press conference for Paul Taboni as Nats president of baseball operations in the coming days, and what could/should be a very eventful October for the Nats is about to get going.
Good riddance to 2025, first of all. And let's move right into 2026 right now, in my mind. And I know there's a couple months until the calendar shifts to 2026, but in my mind, beginning Monday, it is 2026 from a baseball standpoint, and everything that this organization does, and there is a lot to do, is going to shape the 2026 season and beyond. And they can't get started on that soon enough, in my mind. You put this one behind you. There's a lot to go over, a lot to analyze, to figure out what went right and certainly what went wrong and what changes they do want to make with the new administration in charge. But I do think this is the most disappointing season in Nationals history. Now, you could maybe say that the 2008 season with the brand new ballpark and they spent some money on a roster and thought they were maybe ready to start winning. And obviously they had 100 plus losses, and that was a huge disappointment. But deep down, I think everybody kind of knew. It's still new. I don't think anybody was just furious at the state of the organization. What we saw this year in year 5, and yes, it is year 5 of the rebuild that started in 2021, for it to be this bad, to have them make the major changes they made in season and then have to play out the string the rest of the way, and now have to confront these questions of, are they still in a position to try to advance from where they are right now, or do they have to blow it up and start all over again? That to me makes this probably the most disappointing season in Nationals history. And that is a real shame, because there was genuine optimism, not just from us. It was cautious optimism, but there was genuine optimism from a lot of people inside and outside the organization about how this season would play out. And it didn't come anywhere close to matching that optimism.
Where the season went wrong, why the season went wrong. Boy, we could spend 5 hours talking about those things, and we still wouldn't cover everything that there is to cover. I do sense an anger among Nats fans, the likes of which we have not had since the franchise came here, because even when the team was bad 2006 through 2010, and then things started to get better in 2011, and then you had the great success of 2012 through 2019. But even when things were bad 06 through 2010, there still was a honeymoon-like atmosphere to the Nats of, wow, Washington, D.C. finally has an MLB team again. And so there was, I think, in a lot of ways, a forgiveness of the Nats being as bad as they were. And they were bad in those years, and there was dysfunction during those years. There was controversy during those years. But there still was this feeling of, we are grateful to have a team. Things are different now, and I think Nats fans have been more than understanding about the team needing to enter into a rebuild beginning in, yes, 2021, not 2022, 2021. But, there is a sophistication with this Nats fan base of understanding that a rebuild should not take 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Like, a rebuild, if done properly, should take 3 years, maybe 4 years, and then you should really start to see tangible signs of things working. And, I've made this point before, but in so many successful rebuilds, you get a bust-out season, usually sooner than you expect. And I thought that season might be last season. It wasn't. We hoped that this season would be the bust-out season. It clearly wasn't. And there really was a sobering reality that settled in on all of us as this season went on of, the rebuild isn't working. And on July 6th, when the Nats fired their president of baseball operations and general manager Mike Rizzo and their manager Davey Martinez, that was the ultimate sign of, this isn't working and there are major problems here. And from a standpoint of this season, has there ever been a Nats season like this when the team essentially waved the white flag with a little less than 3 months left? I mean, July 6th, Rizzo and Davey get fired, and at that point, the season is done. We are filled with lame ducks at this point in terms of Nats management, and we're all just kind of waiting for the season to be over.
Right. And I think that's what made this one unique and particularly frustrating, is that it just felt like hardly anything from July 6th on mattered. Now, of course, the progress of the young players mattered, and you wanted to see them continue to grow and do better. And things like Dalen Lyle's emergence, that's important, of course. And then things like Brady House's struggles and Dylan Cruz's struggles, those are important as well, on the negative side, I suppose. But the difference between this and, say, a 2021 or a 2022, where obviously they waved the white flag in July at the trade deadline, was that was the start of a process. And you understood what they were going through. And it was a little exciting to see some new guys come in, whether they were already at the big league level or just brought into the organization in the minors, and understanding that was step one in a longer process. This was, as you said, an admission that it didn't work. And now, yes, they want to start all over, or not necessarily start all over, but they're going to revamp the organization and have new people in charge in the most prominent positions. The problem was, this was July 6th, and we knew they're not really going to do any of that until the end of September, beginning of October. And it made those last 3 months as much of a slog as I've ever experienced covering this organization. I understand it was a difficult spot for Miguel Cairo, for all of the coaches, for all the players. They knew what the situation was, and it was not fun for any of them. But boy, was it disappointing to see the way they played very often over those final 3 months. Yeah, they won some games. They actually had a 500 record in September, as it turned out. And yeah, they battled back and, they had their moments along the way. But it felt all along like everyone was just looking ahead to when is this going to be over? When can we turn the page and look ahead to the next season? And that's a tough thing to do for 3 whole months.
And when you look at this team, it's amazing, but bad offensively, bad in terms of starting pitching, bad in terms of relief pitching, bad in terms of defense, way too many outs on the base pass. Like your mom used to tell you, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. If someone forced you, say something nice, truly nice about the 2025 Nats as a team. Like, what would you say? There are individual positives, sure, but the overall output from this team was quite bad. I don't think this was a group of bad guys. They all seem like pretty good guys and, for the most part, hardworking. And, I guess you say to the clubhouse's credit, things never really got ugly in terms of controversy or infighting, at least that we heard of. We didn't have a Jonathan Papelbon, Bryce Harper incident late in this season like we had in 2015 or anything like that. But man, this team just across the board had real major problems. And I believe those problems speak to systemic issues with this team, how it drafts, how it develops, how these guys get coached up. And, this is as big as anything in terms of what Paul Taboni needs to tackle. It's not just getting the right players. It's about getting the right system and the right process in place with this organization from top to bottom, from the major league club all the way down to the lowest level of the minors. Taboni really has to do a deep dive, a thorough examination of where this team has gone wrong. This team has lost its way in a variety of aspects of baseball operations, and it's a giant task here for Paul Taboni to try to fix the way of the Nats and to get the Nats back on track to a proper way.
Culture is the word for it. I think that's the appropriate word. They have to change the culture here. It has become a losing culture over the last 6 years, all of them losing seasons since the World Series, and it goes across every level of the organization. And you mentioned how it was a good group in the clubhouse and we didn't hear about infighting and any of that stuff. And that's 100% true. But I do think there was an interesting point made by Dylan Cruz after this game, saying something that I think those of us around the team picked up on. And I thought it was good to hear one of the players, a prominent young player, mention this. I'm going to read you the quote that he said to us about how they can, the question was about how the difficulty of this season, they can turn that into success next year. He says, I quote from Dylan Cruz, "It all starts with day one next year. Coming out into spring training and setting the tone, finding the standard right away, and really holding each other accountable from the start. I think a lot of times this year, we were able to just kind of brush that things underneath the rug when we should have said something. I think from the start next year, we really need to hold each other accountable and just set the tone, find the standard for next year." I thought that was a pretty telling quote from a rookie outfielder who we know has come from winning clubs and organizations and programs in the past, in college in particular, and wants to set the bar higher in the major leagues. And I think what he's alluding to here is that there were times, I think especially over the second half, once it was clear that they were playing out the string, that you didn't always see, certainly you didn't see clean baseball, but maybe that also applied to their preparation, to their enthusiasm, their attention to detail, and guys maybe going through the motions more than you want to see on a day-to-day basis. When he talks about holding everyone accountable, sometimes they brushed those kinds of things under the rug when they should have said something. That feels to me like Dylan Cruz wanted to speak up at times about whatever he saw himself and probably didn't feel like he was in a position to do that as a rookie who wasn't playing particularly well himself. Let's point out that's a tough thing to try to be a clubhouse leader when you're young and unproductive. And I think among the many things that Paul Taboni has to do, getting experienced, reliable, respected clubhouse leadership is high on the list. They need at least one, preferably multiple veteran players in there who've been there, done that, had success, know how to mold a young group into doing things the right way, because this group was sorely lacking in that. And I think that is a major strike against the previous administration for not building or prioritizing something like that as they built the 2025 roster. Now, I understand you're working within a budget. You can't go get Jason Worth without spending a lot of money on it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a huge contract. You can get those guys on smaller deals and pick the right ones to come in and help set a better tone in the clubhouse.
Yeah, that 100% from Dylan Cruz was an indictment of the culture, an indictment of leadership among players. I think also an indictment of leadership from the coaching staff and even from the front office. You know, how many times this season, in previous seasons, have we heard post-game remarks from Davey Martinez and then Miguel Cairo brushing off mistakes made during the game? And, you know, we always kind of attach the caveat of, well, we don't know what's said behind the scenes. You know, maybe Davey and Cairo sound like this after a game, but maybe behind closed doors, they're letting these guys have it for making these mistakes. But, you know, I think that may have been wishful thinking. I don't get the sense that that was happening. And I think a lot of things were allowed to take place that shouldn't have been allowed to take place. And when Dylan Cruz is saying that, you know, that reminds me of what Mike DeBartolo said in his first session with you guys upon being named interim general manager. When DeBartolo on July 8th says, quote, "We need real change," end quote. That was like a cry for help from Mike DeBartolo. And those comments from Dylan Cruz, I think, are along the same lines, a cry for help.
You know, simply stepping up our game is not enough. You know, we need real change.
Yeah, 100%. And I think where you noticed it, or I certainly noticed it, is how many times did guys make mistakes in the field or mistakes on the bases and repeat offenders of those kinds of things? And were they ever held accountable for them? Whether that means, you know, being benched, but even beyond that, whether they were talked to, scolded, whether they were, you know, told, hey, that's not the right thing to do. You have to be better than that. And even if it was happening behind the scenes, and I'm not sure that it was, but even if it was happening behind the scenes, every once in a while, that has to happen in front of the scenes, in front of cameras. You need a manager. You need players in the clubhouse sometimes to publicly call out those who did not do a good job. And that doesn't mean poor performance, but when it's poor preparation, poor effort, the same mistakes over and over on fundamental areas of the game, sometimes that needs to be put out there in public. And we never saw that really all year, but I feel like especially in the second half of the season.
Assuming we get the Paul Taboni introductory presser this week, it's going to be so interesting to hear what he says. Of course, he's not going to spill the beans on every little thought that he has, but as we all have come to know, you can listen and read between the lines on things, and people will say things that are telling. And I would anticipate some really telling comments being made by Paul Taboni and whoever else ends up speaking at this intro presser, assuming that we get it in the coming days. But that is going to be fascinating. That is going to be must-watch/must-listen-to audio in terms of Taboni and what he does. And by the way, we will be doing a special installment of the Nats Chat podcast for the day after the Paul Taboni intro presser, whenever it happens. Hey, are you a law firm partner or associate looking to transition to a new firm because of compensation, or your firm recently committed to $100 million in pro bono work that you disagree with? If this sounds like you should explore the lateral market and give Mason Kalfas a call. Mason is the top legal recruiter in the Washington, D.C. area. He has been a Nats Chat podcast advertiser since the beginning of our show. Mason will work with you to create a marketing and business plan to pitch to new firms and dramatically increase your compensation and or day-to-day happiness in your new job. Mason has placed partners and associates in just about every large law firm in D.C. and New York, and he can provide plenty of testimonials from candidates he has placed on the outstanding service that they received. You need a strong advocate in your corner to find the best law firm out there for your future career. Call Mason Kalfas today, 202-486-3535.
Hey Nats Chat, Tim Shover's here to tell you about Babbel. Tough loss for the Nationals on Friday night. Here was Jose A. Ferrer after his blown save.
Ya me lo habían acordado al principio, si hacían dos carreras entraba como quiera el juego en el noveno. Y los muchachos remontaron, nos subimos arriba y traté de dar lo mejor de mí. Y las cosas no salieron como se quería.
If you want to get better at understanding Jose during the offseason so that next spring you won't need to wait for that translator to chime in, then check out Babbel. Babbel's tips and tools for learning a new language are approachable and accessible. It's like having a private tutor in your pocket. Babbel offers the opportunity to practice conversation skills right away in speech recognition to make sure you're getting the pronunciation just right. Get up to 55% off at Babbel.com/NatChat. That's spelled BABBEL.com/NatChat. It went up from 50 to 55%. Babbel.com/NatChat. That's spelled BABBEL.com/NatChat.
Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
Here's the wind of the 2-0. Swing a line drive slice to right. Will it get down there and stay fair? Yes, it will. The Nationals have a hit. It's backhand near the line by Fletcher. Brady House turns and holds. And the Nationals, after 5 1/3 perfect innings from Shane Smith, have their first hit against the righty. A flare single to right field, a clean hit for Brady House.
In terms of the 8-0 loss to the White Sox at Nationals Park on Sunday, we're not going to waste your time or our time with an in-depth breakdown of this game. Just a few notes from the game. So James Wood was the Nats starting designated hitter and number 1 batter. He went 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts. Boy, he pushed it when it came to the strikeout record. He did not get to it, though. He finishes the regular season with an MLB worst 221 strikeouts, 2 shy of the MLB record set by Mark Reynolds in 2009 at 223. Look, James Wood, great April, great May, great June. Struggled big time in July and August. He was better in September, so that was good. At least he could say he ended his season on a relative high note. Does not set the strikeout record, got to 30-plus homers, ended up being the Nats' best hitter overall this season, and I think it's going to be so interesting to see how good is he truly moving forward. I think that's a big question with James Wood. He's a good player. Is he the elite-level player we saw April, May, and June, or is he more just like a good player, a really nice player? And time will tell on that.
I feel like this can apply to a lot of guys on this team, and that we've seen this for the last few seasons. That he's number 1 on the list because the potential is immense of what he can be, and what he was for those 3 months was as good as anyone we've seen around here since Juan Soto. But I feel like there are plenty others. C.J. Abrams is high on the list. Mackenzie Gore falls in this category of players who we have seen be really good, all-star caliber for the first half, and then not be able to sustain it in the second half, and not just not sustain it, but kind of fall off a cliff in the second half. I think this is a huge thing for James Wood and for a lot of other guys going into 2026. Some of it's on them. Some of it's on, I think, the next manager and the coaching staff to keep them physically, mentally, and emotionally into it every single day and try to find a level of consistency that they have not shown. Look, for a lot of them, they haven't played 162 games before, but they've all been through it now for the most part. It's time for them to learn from that and understand what it takes to get through the grind of a full season. And yes, you're going to have slumps along the way, but the good players are the ones who can minimize those slumps, get it back on track, both from a physical and a mental standpoint. And that is, I believe, the number 1 challenge for a lot of guys, I think, in the organization. I think James Wood is probably at the top of that list.
Brad Lord was the Nats starting pitcher on Sunday. A disappointing ending to his otherwise encouraging rookie season. 5 runs in 4 innings. He gave up 3 home runs. So Lord for the regular season, over 2 stints in the rotation, 2 stints in the bullpen, 48 games, 19 starts, ERA 4.34, whip 1.29. The Nats bullpen in this game had some more problems. As we had discussed, the Nats bullpen as the season went on really came back down to earth. We in this game had 5 Nats relievers combining to allow 3 runs in 5 innings. The final numbers for Nats relief pitching in the regular season: dead last in MLB in relief pitching ERA 5.59, dead last in MLB in relief pitching whip 1.52. And the Nats were next to last in starting pitching ERA, 5.18. So if you go by ERA, worst bullpen in the majors, second worst rotation in the majors. The pitching is a huge issue, and it's so difficult to fix with pitcher injuries and pitcher development being so tricky. But, you think about all of the things on the table for Paul Taboni, and how do you get this pitching staff to be better, to at least be decent? It's such a difficult challenge. I understand that. But man, this is unacceptable. Both a starting pitching ERA and a relief pitching ERA, each one well over 5.
Yeah, and I think the shame of it is that when you think about it on an individual level and start rattling off some names of guys, Mackenzie Gore, Brad Lord, Cade Cavalli, Jose A. Ferrer, you see glimmers of hope there, and you see guys who have had stretches where they are really good. But just like I was talking about with Wood and Abrams, none of them really showing yet that they can do that over a full 6 months. That's a big step for all of them, but you need more than that. You need depth. You need pitching depth, and you need, if not frontline starters or top, late inning, high leverage relievers, you need the back half of your pitching staff to be more respectable. Think about some of the performances, whether you're talking Jake Irvin and Mitchell Parker, each with a 5.70 ERA, rounding out the rotation. Even Trevor Williams, before he got hurt, in a similar category. When you look at some of the names who filled out the back half of this bullpen over the course of the year, you're looking at guys consistently with ERAs in the 6s, the 7s. Even if you're not the number one guy to call upon in the 7th or 8th inning of a tight game, you've got to be at least respectable enough to keep games within reach, to be able to provide innings in games that you're going to lose and not turn them into blowout losses, but keep them relatively close. Their run differential in the end was awful, as we know. Why was that? Because they got blown out a lot. And they got blown out a lot because they let games get out of hand in the later innings when they were putting pitchers out there who really did not look like quality big league pitchers. So I think there's a lot of change to be done there. It's hard to acquire good pitching, good young pitching or established pitching. I don't know from a starting standpoint how much they're going to be able to do that. I do think from a bullpen standpoint, there's an opportunity here for Taboni and the people who work for him to smartly assemble a bullpen that isn't just about guys number 1 through 3, but is about 1 through 8, and ideally down to 9, 10, 11, and 12 who are at AAA, to be able to have others you can call up along the way. You can send guys down who need a breather. That's really been a problem the last few years, and I think it really was exposed this year. You look at some of the guys they were calling up, shuttling in and out, picking up off waivers. Yeah, some of them did all right at times, but boy, it felt like a challenge just to put together a major league pitching staff for this team for a lot of this season.
It did. And when it came to something like bullpen construction, why is it that this team for so many years has had such problems putting together bullpens in off seasons? Is there something that has been awry with the process? Has the team been valuing the wrong things with relievers? Like, it shouldn't be this difficult season in, season out to put together decent bullpens. We understand nobody bats 1,000 when it comes to these relievers. They're so fickle. They're so year to year. But, golly gee, like, it shouldn't be this hard. This team makes it look like an impossibility when it comes to offseason construction of bullpens. It was the number one weakness for Mike Rizzo. Why was that? What was he valuing that maybe he was wrong to value? Was he undervaluing things? Was he overvaluing things? And again, that's something that Paul Taboni has got to look at here. Why did this team swing and miss on so many bullpen acquisitions over the years? And how can the team be better in that regard?
It felt to me, and I'm no expert on scouting or any of this stuff, but it felt to me like Rizzo's Achilles heel was signing guys who had some track record, experienced relievers who had track records, but maybe were not coming off good years, coming off down years, and maybe on the tail end of their career and hoping they could recapture their form and giving them guaranteed contracts. Look at Jorge Lopez and Lucas Sims and Colin Poche. Those were the big three this year that all flamed out within a couple of months. But even go back several years to Trevor Rosenthal and Kyle Bearclaw. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I think that's where he, and I'm going to put it on him. I don't know if others in the organization were recommending these. Maybe Mike DiBartolo was. I don't know. I'm going to guess not. But that, I think, is where they really failed in a lot of ways. That instead of going out and getting relievers based more on how they projected to be, based on the stuff, based on the metrics, based on pitch shape and type and different styles of pitchers to assemble a full bullpen, it felt like they were more focused on, well, all right, we can't spend top dollar, so we're just going to spend what we have on the quote unquote best available free agents, and wound up giving more money to these veteran past their prime relievers who in so many cases just did not work out at all.
Hey, as the end of the Nats season approaches, a salute to one of the great sponsors of the Nats Chat podcast, Window Nation. If you want new windows, if you need new windows, contact Window Nation. Tell Window Nation that Al Galdi from the Nats Chat podcast sent you. That helps out this podcast a lot, and that gets you a great deal on great Window Nation windows. In fact, now is the best time of year to get new windows. Whether you have old, drafty windows or cheap builder-grade windows, September is the perfect month to protect your home from cooler weather. And right now, Window Nation is offering its most popular offer: buy 2 replacement windows, get 2 for free. Plus, you won't pay any interest, pay any monthly payments, or pay any down payment for 2 years. 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. With Window Nation, you get top quality windows from a trusted company, all at a reasonable price, because Window Nation knows that replacing windows is an investment, and Window Nation wants to make the investment affordable to you. And do not miss this great offer from Window Nation. For listeners of the Nats Chat podcast, the offer is good until September 30th. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free, and you pay nothing for 2 years. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. That's 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. And tell Window Nation that Al Galdi from the Nats Chat podcast sent you.
You know, like I said, today I gotta manage. I got a game to manage, and I'm gonna do my best to get a W. And tomorrow we don't know.
And yes, the issue of money, the issue of spending. We have yet to mention this. We have mentioned it many times. We probably should at least throw it into the mix here. But ownership, the Lerner family, what will Paul Taboni be allowed to do in terms of spending on infrastructure, in terms of spending on a coaching staff, in terms of spending on payroll? Massive questions, hugely important questions. Perhaps we'll get some insight in the coming days. You know, just to take you behind the scenes, our numbers for this season are up. And I've said this to Tim Shovers plenty of times. I can't believe that this season with the struggles of the team, but we are very grateful for that. We are humbled by that. This audience continues to grow, and we thank you very much for that. We enjoy doing this so much, and we couldn't do it without you guys. So thank you sincerely.
I echo those sentiments 100%. It continues to amaze me in the 5 years that we have done this, how the audience has grown, whether it's new people finding out about us, word of mouth, and more than anything, those who've stuck with it from the beginning in 2021 and are there every single morning with us. We can't ever thank you enough for that. And it just underscores what I think we alluded to earlier. This is a passionate fan base. And no, it may not be the size of a fan base or the vocal kind of fan base that you have in New York. By the way, how are they feeling in Queens this morning? You know, this was a bad season in Washington, D.C. I think you might trade it for what they had in Queens. Just a little aside there, because he had to slip that one in at the end of game 162. But fans here expect more They care. They care deeply about this franchise that they've now followed for more than 2 decades. And they've seen it grow into a World Series champion. They've seen it torn down, and they desperately want to see it get back to that winning formula again. And that's reflected in our listenership. We hear you. We know how you all feel about this. We try to convey to you what we know and try to press a lot of these issues that have come up over the last few seasons, and particularly this season. But we thank you for your passion for the Nationals and for listening to us all the time. And I have a feeling, Al, we're going to be talking to them a lot this offseason, more than usual, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done now.
I think you're probably right about that. So, this installment of Nats Chat brought to us by Mason Kalfas, top legal recruiter in Washington, D.C. Mason, a great sponsor of this podcast, has been with us since our first season. You can reach him at 202-486-3535. Look for the next installment of this podcast in the coming days. Basically, the Paul Taboni Intrapresser will happen, and then later that day / early the following morning, the next installment of this podcast will be out. And don't forget about the Nats Chat Podcast Party, October 10th. That's a Friday night, 7 o'clock start time at Walters, the home base for the Nats Chat Podcast. Walters, right by Nationals Park. We very much are looking forward to that.
With a free round on the house because the Nats helped knock the Mets out of the playoffs. Make sure you come for that, if for no other reason, to get your free round on the house from Walters.
Remember, it's bad when your team struggles, but it's made better when other teams struggle. So you can take pleasure in the pain of other people. Don't ever feel guilty about that as a sports fan. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. Hit us up on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. We have a website too, natschatpodcast.com, at which you can purchase a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
And I just want to thank everybody watching for letting us and me into your living rooms, your dens, wherever you're carrying your devices around for the last couple of decades. I really appreciate it. It's been a privilege to be your friend, to be your broadcaster. And I don't know what else other than see you later.
Wainwright rocks into the windup and fires. And a swing and a high drive to left field, well hit. Ozuna drifting back toward the warning track, to the wall, looking up, and there it goes. Michael Taylor drops one into the left field seats for his 3rd career postseason home run. And on the first pitch in the top of the 3rd, the Nationals are on the board and lead the Cardinals here in Game 2, 1-0.
Phillips ready. The 1-0 pitch. Breaking ball hit on the ground right side. Picked by Edwards. Throws to second. Lopez to first. A double play. A killer of a double play as it ends the Mets season. And so, one of the uglier parts of the history of the New York Mets, having their postseason hopes ruined on the final day of the season by the Marlins, has happened again. The Marlins have shut out the Mets, knowing that they needed to win and the Reds needed to lose. Well, the Reds lost, but the Mets could not figure out 5 Miami Marlins pitchers. They're going home.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, blue label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.